Hi guys, welcome back to Ashar Books. Today I'm going to be doing my February wrap up, so all of the books that I read in February. So I had a pretty good reading month. I read 9 books this month, which is pretty much what I've been reading. It's a kind of equivalent of like 2 books a week. And that's kind of what I've been doing lately, and I think it's kind of a good pace for me. Usually I'll read like I tend to read books pretty quick, so I'll read them in like a couple sittings and then go a couple days maybe without reading or slowly reading something, and then I'll pick up another book. So pretty good reading month. I'm gonna do what I did in January and kind of start with my least favorite read of the month and then go to my favorite, which, to be fair, most of these I really enjoyed. Like, all of these are at least a 3.5 stars. So it's not like any of them were, to me, like a bad book this month. I had a really good reading month as far as enjoyment. So the ones that are at the bottom are just ones that I enjoyed less than the ones at the top. And the last 2 at the top, I just couldn't pick which one was my favorite. So we'll have to just talk about them both equally. So the first book I want to talk about is a little bit of a surprise that it was this low on my list and this low of a rating, and it's Don't Kiss the Bride by Carrie and Cole. I gave this one a 4 stars, but it's probably more like a 3.5. I just kind of rounded up on Goodreads. The reason it's a little bit of a disappointment for me, because that's not a bad rating and it's not a bad book, but I loved Torn by Carrie and Cole. I read that years ago. It's one of my favorites. I love it. It's an age gap romance, and I've reread it multiple times, and I just love that book. And I do love Carrie and Cole's other books. I've read a few of them and really enjoyed it. So this one is another age gap romance. So when I heard about it, I was just so excited, because obviously I was hoping it would have the same kind of feeling as Torn. And maybe that was my fault. Like, maybe I was comparing them too much, or maybe I was thinking they would be more similar. So this book follows our main character, who's 18, but technically still in high school. She's in her senior year, and our hero, who I believe is 28 or 30. He's like, it's like 10, I think, or 12-year age gap, and he owns his own construction company. And the two of them meet because she's having car trouble in the parking lot, like late after school, and she can't get her car to start. And he is at the construction site and sees her like in trouble, because the construction site's like across from the school where he's working. And I do like that they gave us his perspective, because you hear him thinking like, oh gosh, this girl's in trouble. Like, I really want to help her. And he's a genuinely good person. But he's also thinking, but like, should I help her? Because will I come across as like a creepy dude who's like trying to like prey on this girl? So he does end up going over to help her, and the two of them kind of form this unlikely friendship, because obviously they really don't have anything in common. And things come out about her living situation, and it's a horrible living situation, and some of those scenes involves hoarding. Like, her mother is a hoarder, and this disgusting conditions, and he finds out about it, and that mixed with the fact that she also has some medical issues that she's been dealing with, and but a lot of things she's just been going through, both physically and mentally, that she really needs to go to doctors for, but doesn't have insurance. So he kind of sees this situation and feels like he can't leave her there when he can help. So that leads to kind of a marriage of convenience, and he offers to marry her. He kind of offers to marry her and give her insurance and give her a better place to live just until she graduates and gets enough money to kind of get her own place. And that's kind of where the story goes. I felt like this one, there was just something missing for me, and it's hard to figure out exactly what, but there were a few things I didn't love. One was that I felt like there was too much back and forth. Obviously, in an age gap or some kind of forbidden romance, there's going to be some thinking or talking about, oh, we can't do this, like we shouldn't do this, but it has to stop at some point, and you have to have both people like on board. And this one, especially the hero, he was just too wishy-washy for me. Like, you know, he was all, of course, at the beginning, they're all both like, we shouldn't do this. And then, you know, they do it. And then, you know, he kept coming back to, we shouldn't do this, and like breaking her heart, because he just felt like it was wrong and they shouldn't be doing this, and so on and so forth. So I just felt like there was too much back and forth, and at one point I got really tired of it. Also, our heroine, you know, like I said, she is just figuring herself out, and she's always had this plan for her life that she wants to do after high school, and I felt like it just wasn't meshing with being with him. Like, of course your plans can change, and of course you can have something come into your life that makes your plans change. But I just felt like that wasn't completely addressed. I don't know. That part just didn't work for me, and some things in the heroine's personality, I just felt like the two of them weren't always at the same maturity level, and I think that really needs to happen if you're gonna do an age gap romance. So anyways, gave it a 3.5 stars. If you want to check it out, definitely do. It's not a bad book at all. Carrie Cole is a beautiful writer, and I'll definitely check out more work from her. It just wasn't exactly what I wanted. The next book is The Wreckage of Us by Brittany C. Cherry, and I gave this one a 4-star. So this one, I love Brittany C. Cherry's books. She always just hits you with the emotional impact and always makes me cry. This one was no different. I did an Instagram post and I said in that, I'm like, I cannot help crying in her books. They just always get me. So this one follows our main character who lives in this small town, and her mother is just, again, a bad living situation. Her mom is like in a relationship with the town like drug dealer, and so she has just always had a really bad childhood growing up, and she's determined to kind of make something better for herself. She goes to get a job at this, it's like a ranch or farm situation that's a really big part of the town, and the owner is really well known as this like big tough guy who's a complete softie, and he's older. And then our hero is his grandson. So when our heroine comes to the farm for her job, the hero is supposed to be the one who kind of shows her around, shows her the ropes, and they hate each other, like hate each other. And there are reasons that you find out throughout the book for why they both kind of dislike each other. He hates her more than I think she hates him, and there is kind of a reason for that. But obviously the two come together and fall in love, and he's also a musician. So he and his friends have a band, and they're kind of right on the brink of success. And throughout the book, they get a record deal and go to LA. And that's a big part of the story, like the two of them figuring it out. I think what didn't work for me for this, and this is a completely personal thing, I think, is that I didn't love that he was like the LA I'm making a record rock star aspect didn't always mesh with the like small town, with the small town and all of her family problems and drama and things she has to go through emotionally, and that whole side of things. Like the two of them, of course, the romance is what brings them together, those two storylines, but I just almost felt like I would have rather have been either two books or like two books of these same characters, where like the first one's all more about the small town, the second one's more about like LA and making the record. I just felt like it was a little jarring moving back and forth. So yeah, that was one reason for the 4-star. The other one was, for some reason, it was just a little forgettable. Typically her books kind of stick with me, and this one, like when I read Eleanor and Gray, that thing stuck with me for like weeks afterwards. I was thinking about it, and this one just didn't. I felt like I kind of forgot about it after I read it. So still a great book. Definitely check it out. I know some people really love this and give it 5 stars, so I'm sure it's just a personal opinion. I definitely, of course, will read more of her books because she's a great author, and I've really loved some of the other ones I've read from her. All right, so the next two were kind of in a series. I thought it was a duology. Apparently there is a 3rd book that came out, so I'm gonna have to read that. But it's The Prince's Bride, not The Princess Bride, The Prince's Bride. Series by J.J. McAvoy. So I'll kind of talk about them together. The first one I gave 4 stars to, and I really like this. So this is a modern royalty romance, and I love a royalty romance. I forgot to say, so for The Wreckage of Us, I read that as part of the Black Author Readathon. I didn't do a bingo board or a like structured TBR because I just knew that was a recipe for disaster for me. Throughout the month, I was just trying to pick authors for the readathon that I wanted to read. So The Wreckage of Us was the first one I read, and then this Duet I actually found because I was looking through some of the recommendations that people made for the Black Author Readathon. There were so many great recommendation lists. And so this was one of them that somebody recommended on Instagram, and I am actually a couple people, I think. And I immediately like downloaded it to my Kindle because I haven't read a royalty romance in a year maybe, and I was really excited to try this one out. And it was such an enjoyable read. I really did enjoy it. So the story follows Odette, who's our heroine, who is an heiress from the United States. Her father was very, very, very wealthy, basically making money through like technology, kind of like Apple type thing. But there is a clause in his will, her father passed away, that to get her inheritance, she has to get married. She has no idea why. She's pretty irritated about this, to be honest, because she does not want to get married. Odette's also a singer, a musician, and pretty independent, and doesn't have any interest in that. And our hero is Nicholas, who is the prince in a European country, kind of like Genovia, that I can't think of at the moment. But his family, the royal family, is in desperate need of funds. They need money through reasons you'll see what happened to the money. And so they want him to have an arranged marriage. He's completely against it. He's like, we are not living in medieval times. I'm not doing that. But they kind of pick Odette out for him, and the two families kind of make this like deal, Odette's mom and the royal family, because they both need a marriage to get the money they need, right? So in the first book, Nicholas goes to Seattle, which is where Odette lives, with her mom. She grew up, and he basically plants himself in her life to try and figure out like, hey, is this gonna work? Like, can we do this or should we not? And I do love that she was never forced into it. It is a marriage of convenience, but it wasn't like you must do this right now. It's like you can make your own choice. And he was there for a long time getting to know her. And I did like that. Only reason I gave it 4 stars for this one is it just dragged a little bit, especially in that middle part when he was kind of getting to know her. I thought it could have been sped up a little bit, because the beginning I loved. I was completely sucked in by J.J. McAvoy's writing. It was so easy to read. It kind of felt almost like reading like a TV show. But the middle just kind of dragged for me. That's the only reason. And then book 2, okay, slight spoilers, since obviously it's book 2. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers, just wait till I put the picture down. But in this one, obviously the two are married, and there's a lot of drama that ensues. And this one, Odette actually is in the country, and there was a lot of conversation about what it is to be a royal and what you have to give up and the kind of stress that is. And also, Odette is a Black woman who will be like the first Black princess in this country. And obviously that leads to a lot of other conversation that I thought was really nice to have. And I liked that it was in a book. It was in a royalty romance book. I think it was just something that added a lot to the book, and I really liked it. I loved Odette's character. She did make some choices that annoyed me, but at the same time, I could completely empathize and understand where she was coming from. So at the end of the day, I couldn't like hate her. I just was like wanting to like go, no, please don't do this. But obviously at the end, it worked out, and Odette's mom is hilarious. I loved her so much. She's just like a firecracker, and she was great. So I give this one 4.5 stars. The only reason I took a half a point off, because overall this was such an enjoyable duet, was in the second book, so the reason they got together is for the money, right? The royal family needed her money. They never really talked about getting the money or what they did with the money or anything, and I felt like it just kind of was dropped. So that was a little weird. And then also her dad loved her. He made mistakes, but he was a good father, and he really did love his daughters. But it never explained why he said she needed to get married, unless I missed it and I'm completely just being a dum-dum. I don't think he did. I kept expecting there to be like a letter or a reason, or this is why I wanted you to get married, to have your inheritance, but it never came that I'm aware of. And I thought that was a little odd, because why force your daughter in like the 21st century to get married to get your inheritance? Anyways, aside from that, definitely recommend, especially if you like royalty romance. The next book I read was The Girl of Fire and Thorns by Rae Carson. This is the first book in, I don't know if this has a name or if it's just the Girl of Fire and Thorns trilogy, but I really liked this. I love these covers. These are like new covers for the series. I already bought book 2. I gave this one 4 stars. So this book is about a girl named Elisa who is a princess, and she is getting married in a marriage of convenience to the king of a neighboring land. And that's basically where it starts. In this book, without saying too much, is kind of about Elisa finding herself. There's of course a lot of, this fantasy world was really interesting as well. It wasn't like something I've read before. It kind of was almost like a desert jungle climate. I know those are 2 different things, but I felt like it was kind of like, it was very warm, it was very hot, it was very like tropical. So I guess that's jungle. But I really liked it. I thought that Ray Carson built a really beautiful world and the characters were really well done. This book really is about Elisa finding herself. And I think she's only 16 when it starts, and she has a lot of kind of growing up to do, maturing, and also just believing in herself. This one has a lot to do. So Elisa was born with this godstone like in her like navel, and this makes her kind of just very special and important. And she finds out that there's a lot more to it, and that perhaps she has a destiny on how she's going to help people. I feel like I'm not explaining this book well. I feel like even when I read the back, I feel like this is a hard book to explain. So I feel like I'm just gonna give up. But I love that Elisa really did seem like such a real person. Elisa really struggles with food, and her weight is definitely something that's talked about in the book. So that was something that I could kind of identify with. I understood that. There's comments on calling her fat and just her dealing with who she is, and she never feels like she's good enough. She never feels like she's enough. She always feels like there's something lacking. Part of that to do with her weight, but part of it just to do with herself. And I like that was in there. I know that wouldn't maybe be for everyone. Someone may not want to read about that. And she definitely, so in the first book, she definitely there's multiple scenes about her, about her eating, and it's definitely, to me, it read as kind of an emotional eating. When she was upset, she definitely went towards that. And I think I could empathize, I understood that part. But overall, I just really liked this fantasy world. I do think it was a little bit slow in parts. I listened to this on audio too, and that helped me through it, but that's why I gave it a 4. I just felt like I understood why this needed to happen. It was such a good setup for the rest of the series. But I just felt like some of it really dragged for me in the middle section. So I'm really excited to continue the series. I already have book 2, like I said, and I'm really really want to see what happens with Elisa and the rest of her friends. And now that she's kind of come into her own, I think it's going to be a really kick-ass character. So really quickly, I did do a read of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So kind of out of place. I'm not a massive classic reader. They're not my favorites. I love watching them. I've said this before, I love period dramas. My preferred way to take in a classic is to watch it. But I wanted to watch the movie of this because the version of Northanger Abbey with J.J. Fields and Felicity Jones is fantastic. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend. It came out in the 2000s. It's so good. This was a reread. I had read it years ago, or at least I'm pretty positive I read it years ago, but I had seen the movie probably 75 times between reading it and now, so I really didn't remember anything but the movie. Now I will say it was a really close adaptation, but there were definitely differences in this, so I decided before I allowed myself to watch the movie again, I was going to read it. And I think I'm going to try and read a few different classics this year, only the ones that I want to. And I haven't read all of Jane Austen's work, so I can't say this is the best book, but I think this is an underrated Jane Austen book because it's such a fun satire on Gothic romances. It's so witty, it's so funny, and I think it's a really sweet story. I love Mr. Tony and Kathy Morland, so if you haven't read this one, it's also really short, so I think you can get through it really quickly. And I really enjoyed this one. I don't know if I'm gonna rate this. I find reading classics hard. Especially if you've seen the film as many times as I have, but it's probably a 4.5, 5-star for me. Okay, so the next couple are probably my favorites of the month, so I'm just gonna kind of put them together, and I gave them all 5 stars, and that is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. I bought the book because I loved it so much. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling that is taking place in kind of a modern world called New Athens. And she definitely creates this whole world though of New Athens. It's just in a more modern day setting, but she has all of the gods and goddesses, and it's so interesting. I was here for this. I saw Avery talking about this. I know she really liked it. I know Crystal, I think, read this from Crystal's Bookish Life. So I just wanted to dive in and see what the fanfare was about, and I agree. I really love this. So this follows Hades and Persephone, and it kind of has the normal storyline to an extent. You know, Hades and Persephone meet at his nightclub. Hades is known as this bargainer, and he makes these deals at his nightclub, and he makes a deal with Persephone, and through that she has to spend time in the underworld and make something grow. There's a lot of twists and turns that come with that. Obviously the two of them have some things to work through before they get together. And I really liked this first book. I really enjoyed this one. I just couldn't stop. Like, I stayed up way too late reading this, and I had to give it 5 stars just on the enjoyment factor alone. I'm loving the whole Greek mythology, and I really, really like this. So definitely check this one out. Then I read book 2, which was A Touch of Ruin by Scarlett St. Clair. I will say, I gave this one 5 stars on Goodreads. It's probably more like a 4.5. There were a few things that I didn't absolutely adore, but I just love this series so much. I felt like I wanted to give it a 5 star. This one kind of is the continuation of book 1, and so I can't say too much about it. The reason I think I would give it a little bit lower of a rating is there again was a little bit of like back and forth between the characters, and some of the choices that Persephone particularly made in this book were really frustrating, and at times I was just like wanted to like throw the Kindle across the room. So that was annoying, but book 2 really, really sets up book 3, and I'm so stoked to read that. It doesn't come out till May, so I'm really struggling because I really want to know what happens, but it's not that much longer. I really recommend this series if you like Hades and Persephone retellings, and these are pretty steamy though. Just know that going in. It's not, you know, it's not without steam. So if that's something that you don't love, maybe steer clear, but otherwise I say dive in. They're really good. Last book I'm going to talk about, which I think was my favorite of the month, but it's hard to pick between that and the Scarlett St. Clair series, was Queen Move by Kennedy Ryan. So I read this one for the Black Author Readathon as well. And I love this book so much. I knew I was going to, so I kind of saved this. Read the Kingmaker Duet last year. It was one of my top books, or 2 books of 2020. So I knew this is kind of the spin-off of Kimba, which is Lennox's best friend. I knew I was gonna love this, so I was kind of saving it, but also a little hesitant because I knew it was a friends to lovers trope, and I'm not always the biggest fan of that. A lot of times I just kind of feel like, okay, if you've been friends for this long, why haven't you done anything about it till now? Especially because I knew they were going to be like in their like mid-30s, like early to mid-30s, which I love that they're slightly older characters. But anyway, so long story short, totally worked for me. It was so good. So this follows Kimba, who is Lennox's partner in their kind of company. She's a complete badass, and I love Kimba so much. Like, I think we all need to strive to be her in our lives. And then Ezra, who is basically was her best friend from like 6 months old till I think they were 13 or 14, when his family moved away. And Ezra, they grew up in Atlanta. That was kind of fun too, because I live outside of Atlanta, and so it was kind of fun seeing a lot of the things mentioned from where most of the book takes place in Atlanta. And it was really fun. The first part of the book, though, I will say, was when they were children and then growing up. So I at first was having a little bit of a hard time getting into it, but once I was in. And then something happens that pulled these two apart. Obviously they go on to both have really big lives, full lives, and do a lot, and then they come together again. And so I think that's why the friends to lovers worked for me, because there were extenuating circumstances that made it so. And oh my gosh, this was just such a heartfelt book, and you just could feel the emotion like rolling off the pages. Really enjoyed it. This is definitely my favorite friends to lovers that I've ever read, and maybe makes me want to try more in that subgenre or in that trope, I guess. Loved it, and wow, the steam. Wow, like, whoo. I also listened to this on audio, so maybe that was why. But Kennedy Ryan can really write some steamy scenes, and I feel like this one, even more so than some of her other books that I've read, really, really did it. So I love that one. It was 5 stars, and I really want to buy the physical book to add to my like Kingmaker Duet, because they're such pretty covers, and I really want to own them all. All right, guys, so those are all the books I read in February. I feel like I've been talking for a really long time, so I'm sorry if this video is too long, but I would love to know if you guys have read any of these or your thoughts on what your favorite book of February was. I would absolutely love to know down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.